Hello, sexy people. This is Jackie here with the sexypolitico.com, and I'm coming back to you now to talk about more wonderful Black women who have done great work in our government, and I'm going to focus this week on the executive branch. So if you like what I'm talking about and you want to help us out, we've got a Patreon. Just look for the Sexy Politico on Patreon. And also there's ways to support us if you look in the comment section also. So I'm going to start by looking at Black women who have held cabinet level positions in the United States government, and also talk about the women who have been nominated by the Biden administration, but as of the time of recording this, have not been approved for their positions. The first woman we're going to look at is Patricia Roberts Harris. She was an American government official, and she was also a diplomat. Under President Jimmy Carter's administration, she served as both the U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD as we like to call it, and the United States Secretary of Health and Education and Welfare, which was renamed Secretary of Health and Human Services during her tenure. She was the first African-American woman to serve in the United States cabinet, and due to that fact, she was also the first African-American woman to enter the line of succession to the presidency. You know, the basic, it's a bit of a complicated thing, but every single cabinet position, it has a position in line to be president if there is ever some weird national disaster, which is where the whole designated survivor thing comes from. Before Carter's administration, she had served as the United States ambassador to Luxembourg under President Lyndon B. Johnson, and was the first African American woman to represent the United States as an ambassador. Moving forward a few years, we have Alexis Margaret Herman. She is currently an American politician. She is the 23rd U.S. Secretary of Labor under President Bill Clinton. Herman was the first African American to hold this position. Prior to serving as secretary, she was the assistant to the president and director of White House Office of Public Engagement. Herman is from Alabama, and after she went to college, she worked to improve employment opportunities for Black laborers and women, and she joined the Carter administration working as the director of Labor Department's Women's Bureau, and she became an active member of the Democratic Party, working in campaigns of Jesse Jackson and chief of staff for Democratic National Committee under Ronald H. Brown. When Bill Clinton was elected, she joined his cabinet in 1997, and following the defeat of Al Gore in 2000, she remained an active member of Democratic politics, and she now participates in the private sector and serves on the board of directors for Coca-Cola and Toyota. Now, when we think of Black women in the cabinet, I think we all have one woman that just comes to mind, and that's Condoleezza Rice. Condoleezza Rice is an American diplomat. She's a political scientist. She's a civil servant. She's a professor who is the current director of the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. She served as the 66th United States Secretary of State from 2005 to 2009, and as the 20th United States National Security Advisor from 2001 to 2005. As a member of the Republican Party, Rice is the first African-American female Secretary of State and the first woman to serve as the National Security Advisor. Until the election of Barack Obama as president in 2008, Rice and her predecessor, Colin Powell, were the highest-ranking African Americans in the history of the federal executive branch by virtue of the Secretary of State standing both fourth in line of presidential succession. Rice was born in Alabama. She grew up in the South that was racially segregated. She obtained her bachelor's degree from the University of Denver and her master's degree in political science from the University of Notre Dame. In 1981, she received her PhD from the School of International Studies at the University of Denver. She worked in the State Department under the Carter administration and served as on the National Security Council as the Soviet and Eastern European Affairs Advisor under George H.W. Bush during the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the German reunification from 89 to 91. Rice later pursued an academic fellowship at Stanford University, where she later served as provost from 93 to 99. And in December of 2000, she joined the Bush administration, this is baby Bush, as President George W. Bush's national security advisor. And in Bush's second term, she succeeded Colin Powell as Secretary of State. She was later the second female Secretary of State after Madeleine Albright. That was during Bill Clinton's administration. Following her confirmation as Secretary of State, Rice pioneered the policy of transformational diplomacy directed towards expanding the number of responsible democratic governments in the world, and especially in the greater Middle East. That policy has faced challenges as Hamas has captured many Palestinian elections, and influential countries including Saudi Arabia and Egypt, have maintained authoritarian-style systems. While in this position, she chaired the Millennium Challenge Corporation's board of directors. In 2009, Rice returned to Stanford as a political science professor and the Thomas Barbara Stephenson Senior Fellow of Public Policy at the Hoover Institute. And in 2010, she became a faculty member of the Stanford Graduate School of Business and is director of its Global Center for Business and the Economy. This woman has been busy. In January of 2020, it was announced that Rice would succeed Thomas W. Gillian as the next director of the Hoover Institute on September 1st, 2020. She is on the board of directors of Dropbox and McKenna Capital Management, LLC. Why is Condi Rice so important? Condi Rice is what we think of when we think of a black woman in the executive branch, because the Secretary of State is so important, and she was the National Security Advisor right after 9/11. She was front and center in media, and she was front and center in policy and politics. This woman deserves a full podcast directed just to her herself, which I will be giving in a later date. Hazel Reid O'Leary was the 7th United States Secretary of Energy from 93 to 97. She was appointed by President Bill Clinton. She was the first woman and first African American to hold this position. As Secretary of Energy, O'Leary declassified documents detailing how the United States had previously conducted secret testing on the effects of radiation on unsuspecting American citizens. O'Leary received criticism for her excessive spending as Secretary. After her time as Secretary of Energy, she served as president of Fisk University, which is a historically black college, and her alma mater from 2004 to 2013. Loretta Lynch is an American lawyer who served as the 83rd Attorney General of the United States from 2015 to 2017. Lynch is a Harvard Law School graduate and practiced law in New York and became a federal prosecutor in the 90s, rising to become head of the Eastern District Office. She was nominated by President Obama in November 2014. In April 2015, Lynch was confirmed by the Senate by a 56-43 vote, making her the second African American, the second woman, and the first African American woman to be confirmed for the position. She was sworn in as Attorney General in April 2015, and her tenure ended in January of 2017. Susan Rice is an American diplomat, policy advisor, public official, and serving as director of the United States Domestic Policy Council since 2021. She's a member of the Democratic Party. Rice has served as the 27th U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations from 2009 to 2013, and as the 24th U.S. National Security Advisor from 2013 to 2017. Rice was born in D.C. and attended Stanford and the New College of Oxford, where she was a Rhodes Scholar and received a Ph.D. I don't know what a DPhil means, but it's a PhD level thing. She served on President Bill Clinton's National Security Council staff from 93 to 97 and was the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs at the State Department from 97 to 2001. Appointed at age 32, Rice was at the time the youngest person to have served as a Regional Assistant Secretary of State. Rice saw significant changes in U.S. Africa policy, including the passage of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, support for democratic transitions in South Africa and Nigeria, and an increasing U.S. focus on fighting HIV/AIDS. A former Brookings Institute fellow, Rice served as foreign policy advisor to the Democratic presidential nominations of Michael Dukakis, John Kerry, and Barack Obama. After Obama won the 2008 presidential election, Rice was nominated as ambassador to the United Nations, and she was confirmed by unanimous consent in January 2009. During her tenure in the United Nations, she championed for human rights, anti-poverty agendas, elevated climate change, and LGBT and women's rights issues as global priorities, and committed the U.S. to agreements such as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the UN Millennium Developmental Goal. She defended Israel at the Security Council and pushed for tough sanctions against Iran and North Korea, advocated for U.S. and NATO intervention in Libya in 2011. She was mentioned as a possibility for replacing Hillary Clinton in 2012, but she withdrew her consideration following the controversy related to the Benghazi attacks. Obama instead named her as National Security Advisor in 2013, where she supported the U.S.'s efforts on the Iran nuclear deal of 2015, the Ebola epidemic, the reopening of Cuba, and the Paris Agreement on climate change. In 2021, Rice became the Director of Domestic Policy Council for the Biden administration. There are 3 more cabinet positions that for Black women that the Biden administration has announced but have yet to be confirmed by the Senate as of the time of this recording. The first is Marcia Louise Fudge. She's an American politician who has been a U.S. representative for Ohio's 11th congressional district since 2008. She won in a 2008 special election uncontested, succeeding Stephanie Tubbs Jones, who died in office. Fudge was chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and in the 113th Congress, President Joe Biden nominated Fudge as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and on February 4, 2021, the U.S. Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs advanced her nomination by a vote of 17-7. The next person, Linda Thomas Greenfield, is an American diplomat who served as the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs in the United States Department of State Bureau of African Affairs from 2013 to 2017. Following her work as a diplomat, Thomas Greenfield became a senior vice president at the Albright Stonebrook Group in D.C. Joe Biden has nominated her to be the next United States ambassador to the United Nations. And the last person is Cecilia Elena Rose. She is an American economist and dean at the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University, and she's been nominated to be chair of the Council of Economic Advisors in November 2020. So what can I say about these nominations? Well, all but one of them have been under Democratic presidents that I think has something to say about something. But all of these women are capable, they're strong, and there should be more of them. I can't wait for people's gender and for their race and ethnicity to one day just be something that people recognize as being a tangible part of their life experience and character, and that we completely think about under Democrat, Republican, conservative, or liberal administrations. We realize that people of different backgrounds have different experiences that can help make this country better. But as it turns out, it only seems as though Democrats and just Condoleezza Rice are the only ones who get to have their foot in the door. And also, apparently, most of these women have gotten their start during the Carter administration. So, I don't know what about the Carter administration was so great for Black female diplomats, but almost everybody who is of a certain age got started in the Carter administration. Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you like what you've heard, please support us. We have a Patreon. You can support us here on this page on Anchor. Thank you again. We have our Twitter and social media handles. Come give us a like and check us out. Go to thesexypolitico.com if you want to see more long-form articles. And I hope that you've been enjoying this content. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Stay sexy. Bye.